February 23, 1943. Telefunen headquarters, Berlin. The magnifying glass trembled slightly in Obstadelrunge's hand as he examined the copper block salvaged from the wreckage 3 weeks earlier. "This cannot be real," he wrote in his classified technical report. "No nation could achieve such miniaturization while simultaneously producing such power output." Through the laboratory windows he could see the smoke rising from the bombed factories across the city. Tangible evidence of Allied air superiority. Yet here on his workbench lay physical proof that the technological gap was far worse than anyone in the German High Command had dared to admit. The device before him, retrieved from a downed British Sterling bomber near Rotterdam on the night of February 2nd, measured barely 10 centimeters across. This cavity, magnetron as the British called it, generated microwave radar frequencies that rendered every German countermeasure obsolete. It was elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its implications, and utterly beyond anything German science had achieved. What neither Runge nor his colleagues yet understood was that this single copper block would explain a mystery that had been costing Grand Admiral Karl Donitz 40 submarines per month. Hemorrhaging of men and machines that threatened to lose Germany the Battle of the Atlantic within weeks. The mathematical certainty of German defeat was being written not in naval strategy but in electromagnetic wavelengths that German radar detectors could not see. The psychological transformation had begun. On that freezing February morning in Rotterdam, Dutch resistance members had watched German soldiers cordoning off the crash site with unusual urgency. Had been haunting German commanders for months. His position as head of the Luftwaffe's entire communications and radar infrastructure made him uniquely qualified to assess whatever technology the British bomber might contain. Martini dispatched his most experienced technical teams to the crash site. Their initial reconnaissance confirmed his worst fears and greatest hopes simultaneously. The bomber's belly contained equipment unlike anything German forces had encountered. The rotating antenna assembly, the cathode ray display system, the sophisticated power supply, all pointed to advanced radar technology operating on principles that German engineers had theoretically discussed, but dismissed as impractical for operational deployment. But when his technicians carefully extracted the transmitter assembly from the wreckage, examining the component that powered this mysterious system, what they found defied German understanding of physics and engineering. The magnetron itself, British model CV-64, consisted of a solid copper cylinder, approximately 8 centimeters in diameter and 12 centimeters long. 8 cylindrical cavities had been precision machined into the copper, arranged symmetrically around a central cathode. The entire assembly was surrounded by powerful permanent magnets. It was deceptively simple in appearance. Yet initial field tests suggested it generated enormous microwave power at frequencies German equipment could neither produce nor detect reliably. Martini ordered the device transported immediately to Berlin, under armed guard. He had seen enough to know this discovery might explain why Donitz's Hubit were dying at unprecedented rates. Depth charges had bracketed his diving boat, causing severe damage that forced an emergency return to port. "We were blind," Schwanke wrote in his war diary. The Metox gave no alarm. The aircraft appeared as if materialized from darkness itself. Only luck saved. "We heard the bombs falling and crash dived with seconds to spare. Detector should have warned us minutes in advance, giving us time to dive safely. Instead, we had no warning at all. Either the British have developed radar our detectors cannot sense, or they are using some other technology we do not understand. Whatever the explanation, we are being hunted by enemies we cannot detect until the moment of attack." Similar reports flooded into U-boat headquarters in Paris. Throughout the winter, boats were being caught on the surface at night with no warning. Aircraft seemed to see through darkness and weather that should have provided cover. The MTOX radar detectors, which had given U-boats advanced warning of aircraft equipped with older ASV Mark II radar systems operating at 1.5 m wavelengths, had become worse than useless because commanders still trusted them to provide adequate warning. The statistics told a grim story that would become catastrophic by spring. In November 1942, German U-boats sank approximately 119 merchant ships totaling 729,000 tons worldwide, losing 13 submarines in return. December saw 60 merchant ships totaling 330,000 tons sunk, with 5 U-boats lost. By January 1943, sinkings dropped to 37 ships while U-boat losses climbed to 7. February saw 34 merchant ships sunk and 17 U-boats lost. The exchange rate, once heavily in Germany's favor, was collapsing at an accelerating pace. Admiral Karl Donitz, promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the entire Marine on January 30, 1943, while retaining direct control of U-boat operations through his subordinate staff, watched these numbers with growing alarm. His headquarters maintained detailed plots of every U-boat position, every convoy route, every engagement. The patterns emerging from these plots made no sense according to conventional naval warfare logic. U-boat approaching convoys in darkness were being intercepted before they could attack. Boats transiting the Bay of Bisque under cover of night were being bombed with precise accuracy. Submarines running submerged during daylight were somehow being tracked and depth-charged. Allied aircraft appeared to possess supernatural ability to locate submarines in conditions where visual detection should be impossible. The weather conditions during many attacks ruled out visual detection entirely. Yet, the attacks came with devastating precision. Corvette and Capitaine G.A. Hessler, Donitz's son-in-law, who had married his daughter Ursula in November 1937, served as first staff officer at U-boat headquarters. Hessler spent weeks analyzing combat reports, seeking explanation for the mysterious losses. The pattern was clear but incomprehensible.
Kane's fingers moved across the transcript pad, translating death into Imperial Gothic with practiced efficiency. 13th hour, 7th minute 43 seconds. Voice identified as Foreman Gorix Helvast, Sector 7 Alpha. Last words, quote, "I tried to save them all." End quote. Duration of death rattle, 17 seconds. Cause of cessation, lung dissolution consistent with virus strain TERS. Page after page, death after death until the transmission ended with the final terrible silence that meant another world had been cleansed from Imperial records. Kane removed his headset and sat back in his chair, allowing himself the luxury of 30 seconds to remember that he was still alive. Then he prepared for the next transmission. The Echo men were selected according to criteria that remained classified at the highest levels of the administratum. They were not volunteers. They were not criminals paying penance. They were chosen from the ranks of Imperial servants who had demonstrated specific psychological traits that made them suitable for the work. High tolerance for stress, exceptional auditory processing. Most importantly, the ability to compartmentalize trauma in ways that allowed continued function. The selection process began in childhood, though the candidates were never told what they were being prepared for. Orphans from the underhive tested for their response to recorded screams. Servo skull operators who showed no emotion while documenting atrocities. Vox operators who could maintain clarity while transmitting reports of entire companies being consumed by tyrannids. 1 in 10,000 possessed the necessary qualifications. Of those, 1 in 100 survived the training. The training took place in facilities that existed on no official map deep beneath Terror's surfaceware. The screams of the dying could not disturb the work of the living. Candidates were exposed to progressively worse transmissions. Their psychological responses monitored by medici who had taken vows of silence. Those who broke were mind-wiped and assigned to other duties. Those who adapted were promoted to the next level of horror. By the end of their training, Echo Men had been conditioned to experience human suffering as mere data. They could listen to a child's last words without flinching. They could transcribe descriptions of viral dissolution with the same emotional engagement as a weather report. They had become perfect instruments for the Imperium's darkest necessity. Human beings transformed into biological recording devices that could process trauma without succumbing to it. But conditioning, no matter how thorough, could not account for everything. The human mind, even one restructured for maximum trauma tolerance, retained its capacity for pattern recognition, and patterns once recognized could not be ignored. Kane first noticed the inconsistency during his 8th year of service while transcribing the death of Hive World Mortalis. The transmission should have lasted 47 hours, the time required for the virus bombs to consume a population of 30 billion. Instead, it ended after 39 hours with 8 hours of death unaccounted for. The official report blamed atmospheric conditions for the signal degradation, but Kane had listened to enough dying worlds to know the sound of incomplete annihilation. Similar inconsistencies appeared in subsequent transmissions, periods of silence where there should have been screams, voices that cut off too abruptly to be explained by normal death processes. Most disturbing of all, transmissions that seemed to continue after the official moment of planetary death, carrying sounds that resembled voices but conveyed no recognizable words. Kane documented these anomalies in his reports as regulations required. The responses were always the same: atmospheric interference, equipment malfunction, stress-induced auditory hallucinations.
Allied detection capabilities had improved dramatically over a very short period between late 1942 and early 1943, suggesting new technology rather than improved tactics or training. But what technology could see through darkness, clouds, and fog? What could detect a submarine's small conning tower from miles away? What could track a periscope wake or snorkel exhaust in conditions where human observers would be completely blind? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be found. Donitz convened crisis meetings with Germany's top scientists and engineers throughout January and February 1943. The discussions revealed disturbing ignorance about Allied capabilities and troubling complacency about German technological superiority. German radar experts insisted that no radar system could effectively operate at wavelengths shorter than about 50 centimeters, due to fundamental power generation limitations. The vacuum tube technology available, they argued, simply could not generate sufficient power at higher frequencies to make shorter wavelength radar practical for military applications. The MTOX detectors designed to detect Allied radar operating at 1.5 m wavelength should theoretically warn of any radar-equipped aircraft. The system worked by detecting the electromagnetic emissions from aircraft radar, giving Hubert several minutes warning to crash dive before the aircraft could close to attack range. Yet clearly they were not providing adequate warning anymore. Something had changed in Allied capabilities. But what? Some scientists speculated that the Allies had developed infrared detection systems that could sense engine heat from U-boat diesel exhaust. Others suggested acoustic detection, though this seemed implausible at the operational distances involved. A few voices mentioned the theoretical possibility of centimetric radar using advanced magnetron technology, but this was dismissed as impractical. Germany's own research into such systems had concluded they offered no tactical advantage worth the enormous development investment required. The British could not possibly have solved problems that had defeated German engineering. The experts assured Dunit German science was the best in the world. If German engineers had concluded sentiment-Rick radar was impractical, then it must be impractical. The Allies must be using some other approach, perhaps multiple detection methods working in combination. The idea that Britain, suffering under years of strategic bombing with its industrial base under constant attack, could have developed revolutionary radar technology superior to anything Germany possessed seemed absurd to many German experts. This complacent certainty would shatter completely when Runge's team at Telefunen began examining the Rotterdam device. The magnetron arrived in Berlin on February 5, 1943, accompanied by photographs of the complete H2S installation and detailed reports from the crash site. Runge assembled Germany's top microwave specialists for what would become known as the Rotterdam Working Group, or Arbeitsschaft Rotterdam. Their task was to determine exactly what the device was, how it worked, and most critically, what capabilities it provided the Allies. The first meeting of this working group would occur on February 22nd or 23rd at Telefunen's Berlin offices.
In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton Standard hydroatic propeller with paddle blades 13 feet in diameter with broad chord blades that bit into the air like massive OES. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also improved acceleration, allowing P-47s to build energy faster in level flight. Headman Heinz Knoker of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He wrote in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar created by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone. A deep threatening rumble that meant death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag thunderclap. Though bound by her oath of service to report any signs of mental degradation, she had begun asking questions that suggested her own concerns about the program's true nature. During Kane's monthly examination, Thorne's standard queries about hearing loss and neural fatigue carried subtle undertones. How clearly could he distinguish between authentic death sounds and artificial audio? Had he noticed any changes in the quality of recent transmissions? Did his dreams contain elements that seemed borrowed from his work? These questions danced at the edge of acceptability, probing for information without crossing into open sedition. Kane's responses were equally careful, acknowledging anomalies without suggesting conscious agency behind them. Yes, some transmissions contained unusual audio artifacts. Yes, the quality of recent signals seem different from earlier recordings. No, he had no theories about the cause of these variations. Through this careful exchange, both examiner and subject acknowledged a shared awareness that something was wrong without committing to any specific interpretation of the evidence. But awareness once awakened demanded action. The anomalous transmissions were not random glitches or equipment failures. They were messages, attempts at communication from something that existed in the space between worlds, using the death screams of Imperial citizens as a medium for contact. Whatever was speaking had intelligence, intention, and apparently unlimited patience to make itself understood. The implications were staggering. If the anomalies represented genuine contact from an external intelligence, then every exterminatus had potentially opened a channel for that intelligence to influence Imperial space. The Echo Men were not merely recording the death of worlds. They were facilitating some form of communication with entities that existed beyond the boundaries of normal reality. Each transcript they produced might contain hidden messages, coded instructions, or subtle corruptions designed to influence Imperial policy. Yet, the alternative explanations were equally disturbing. If the anomalies were products of collective madness among the Echomen, then the program had failed in its fundamental purpose. The psychological conditioning designed to prevent mental breakdown had instead created a shared delusion so powerful that multiple operators experienced identical hallucinations. Either possibility suggested that the Echo Men could no longer be trusted to perform their duties. Kane understood that his growing awareness put him in mortal danger. Echo Men who asked too many questions disappeared. Echo Men who shared their suspicions with others disappeared faster. The program had safeguards built into every level of its operation, designed to identify and eliminate threats to operational security. His unauthorized communications with Vane, his careful probing during medical examinations, his personal documentation of anomalous patterns, all of these activities marked him as a potential security risk. But the truth, once glimpsed, could not be ignored. The transmissions were changing, becoming more coherent, more purposeful. Whatever intelligence lay behind the anomalies was growing stronger, using each exterminatus as an opportunity to expand its influence. The Echo Men were unwitting collaborators in humanity's contact with something that existed outside the normal boundaries of space and time. The breaking point came during Kane's 27th year of service. While transcribing the death of Hive World Turs Majoris, the planet had fallen to a genestealer cult. Its population transformed into willing servants of the tyrannid hive mind. The exterminators had been conducted with unusual haste. Virus bombs deployed before the full extent of the infestation could be documented.
The initial examination on February 6th revealed the magnetron's basic operating principle. Within hours, the cylindrical cavities acted as resonant chambers, generating and amplifying electromagnetic oscillations. As electrons spiraled through the magnetic field created by the permanent magnets, it was conceptually similar to earlier splitter node magnetron designs that German engineers had experimented with in the 1930s, but executed with a level of engineering sophistication that shocked the German team. Dr. Otto Hakenberg, a young physicist assigned to document the examination, would later recall the moment of realization in interviews conducted after the war. When we first energized the magnetron using laboratory power supplies, the frequency counter registered 3.3 gigahertz, a frequency we could barely measure, let alone generate with any power. The output meter showed 40 kilowatts of peak power. It was like discovering the enemy-possessed artillery when you thought the battlefield limited to rifles. We understood immediately why the MTOX was useless. It was built to detect meter-wavelength radar operating around 1.5 m or 200 megahertz. This device operated at 9.1 centimeters wavelength, more than 16 times shorter. Our detectors were completely deaf and blind to this radiation. The electromagnetic spectrum the British were exploiting was entirely outside the range our warning receivers could detect. We had been fighting blind, unaware that the enemy could see us clearly while we saw nothing. Runga's team worked around the clock for 2 weeks, reverse engineering the complete H2S system from the wreckage and the recovered components. The magnetron powered a rotating antenna that scanned a 360 degrees arc beneath the aircraft. Returns appeared on a plan position indicator cathode ray display, creating a map-like image showing coastlines, cities, rivers, and terrain features with remarkable clarity. For the first time, bomber crews could navigate and identify targets in complete darkness or through solid cloud cover. The system had been designed primarily for strategic bombing navigation, allowing Pathfinder aircraft to mark targets for following bomber streams regardless of weather conditions. British bombers could now attack Germany in weather that had previously provided natural protection. But the implications for submarine warfare were even more profound than the bombing applications. The same cavity magnetron technology, adapted for air-to-surface search radar designated ASV Mark III, could detect a submarine's conning tower from 20 m away in any weather day or night. The small radar cross-section that had previously protected submarines from detection meant nothing against this sensitive, high-frequency system operating in the centimetric wavelength band. Worse yet, the microwave emissions were completely undetectable by German radar warning receivers. All existing German detection equipment, including the MTOX system that U-boat relied upon, operated in the meter wavelength range. The MTOX could.
I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them. Couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s systematically destroyed German movement in daylight. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability to respond to Allied advances. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced vehicle armor, deployed more anti-aircraft guns, developed new camouflage techniques. Nothing worked. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and firepower made them nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its worth in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's qualities were perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, developed tactics specifically for the Pacific. On October 11, 1943, personal information about living Imperial citizens that could only have been obtained through methods that violated the fundamental laws of reality. The dead worlds claimed to exist outside normal spacing in a realm where the psychic resonance of mass extinction had created a parallel reality overlapping with the material universe. From this position, they could observe Imperial activity without being detected, learning the strengths and weaknesses of humanity's defenses against threats that existed beyond the warp. Most disturbing was their claim that the exterminatus program itself had been subtly influenced by their growing power. Decisions about which worlds to cleanse, which methods to employ, which populations to spare or condemn. All of these choices carried the invisible influence of intelligence that wanted to maximize its own growth. through the harvesting of death. Every world you destroy makes us stronger, they had told him during a recent transmission. Every population you cleanse adds to our numbers. The Imperium believes it is purging contamination, but it is actually feeding us. We have become parasites of extinction, growing fat on the very process designed to preserve humanity's purity. The implications extended far beyond the Echomen or even the Exterminators program. If the dead worlds possessed the ability to influence Imperial decision-making, then humanity's entire defensive strategy might have been compromised from within. The galaxy's most extreme sanction, the final tool of Imperial authority, had become a weapon turned against its wielders. Kane realized that he and his fellow Echomen occupied a unique position in this cosmic horror. They were the only Imperial servants who could detect the influence of the dead worlds, the only humans with regular access to evidence of the entity's growing power. But they were also the most isolated, the most expendable, the least likely to be believed if they attempted to sound an alarm. The program's safeguards ensured that Echo Men remained quarantined from normal Imperial society. Their communications were monitored. Their movements were restricted. Their psychological profiles were designed to identify potential security risks before they could act on forbidden knowledge. Even if Kane could somehow contact higher authorities, his warnings would be dismissed as the ravings of a mind broken by decades of trauma exposure. Yet, the alternative was to remain complicit in humanity's gradual consumption by forces that fed on extinction itself. Each day of continued service added to the power of entities that viewed human civilization as nothing more than a convenient source of psychic nutrition. Each transcript he produced helped strengthen the connection between the realm of the dead and the space occupied by the living. The weight of this knowledge began affecting Kane's work in ways that could not be hidden from his supervisors. His transcription accuracy declined as he struggled to separate authentic death sounds from the increasingly complex messages woven through them. His medical examinations revealed stress indicators that suggested impending psychological breakdown. Most damning, his reports began including subtle references to patterns and anomalies that violated the strict protocols governing Echoman documentation.
Detect radar operating between 1.3 and 2.6 m wavelength, covering the frequency range of ASV-M2 radar that had equipped Allied aircraft through 1942. But this new centimetric radar operated at 9.1 centimeters, a frequency 17 times higher than anything German warning receivers could detect. Hubert were running blind into enemy attacks, their defensive systems obsolete without their knowledge. The technological surprise was complete and devastating. On February 23, 1943, the Rotterdam Working Group presented their findings to German military and industrial leadership. While no documentary evidence confirms the personal attendance of either Reich Marshal Hermann Göring or Admiral Dönitz at this technical working group meeting, both were certainly briefed on the findings. Representatives from every major German electronics firm attended, including engineers from Telefunen, Siemens, AEG, and Lorenz. Senior Luftwaffe signals officers and marine technical specialists filled the conference room at Telefunken headquarters. The mood was somber. Runge began his presentation with a statement that would be recorded in the minutes and later recovered by Allied investigators after the war. We must report with complete frankness that the British have achieved a technological breakthrough of extraordinary significance. The cavity magnetron represents an advance in microwave generation that exceeds German capabilities by at least 3 years of normal development. More critically for current operations, the device enables radar detection systems against which we have no countermeasures and no defenses. The presentation detailed the technical specifications of the CV-64 magnetron, 8 resonant cavities machined into a copper block, operating at 3.3 GHz frequency with 9.1 centimeters wavelength, peak power output of 40 kW, compact construction suitable for aircraft installation, robust design, capable of withstanding combat conditions, production quality indicating established manufacturing processes rather than experimental prototypes. The implications were devastating. If the British could manufacture these devices in quantity, and the production quality suggested they could, then every Allied aircraft and ship could potentially be equipped with radar systems against which Germany had no defense. The MTO warning receivers were useless. The extensive network of German radar installations operating in the meter wavelength range would be increasingly obsolete. German night fighters, German anti-aircraft defenses, German naval vessels all relied on radar technology that the British had leapfrogged by an entire generation. When Goering was briefed on these findings, possibly at the Humboldtine Flak Tower in Berlin, where the reassembled H-2S system was demonstrated, his reaction was reportedly one of considerable consternation. The Reichsmarschall, who had boasted in 1939 that no enemy aircraft would ever bomb Germany, now faced evidence that British bombers could navigate and bomb in any weather conditions using technology Germany could not match. Dönitz, when briefed through his staff channels, understood the implications more clearly than anyone else in the German High Command. His U-boat force had lost 39 submarines in the first 2 months of 1943, 17 in January and February combined.
By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots? The German pilot's smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S filled the flight line. Flown in from depots in England, the Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Boden-Platter, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. These losses they could never replace. The Americans lost 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, all replaced within a week. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. But even limited exchange confirmed that Holtz had experienced the same progression of anomalies, the same growing awareness of intelligence within the transmissions, the same realization that the Echomen were unwitting participants in something far larger than Imperial record-keeping. The patterns are accelerating, Holtz whispered while organizing files related to the cleansing of Sector Moranis. Whatever is speaking through the transmissions is preparing for something. The messages have become more urgent, more specific about timing and coordination. Kane nodded, pretending to focus on his own filing duties while processing this information. How many others have noticed? All of us, Holtz replied. Every Echo man in the facility has detected the anomalies. Some have been reporting them for years. Others have tried to ignore them. But the intelligence behind the transmissions will not allow itself to be ignored indefinitely. The implications were staggering. If every Echo man had become aware of the anomalous transmissions, then the entire program was compromised. The psychological conditioning designed to prevent exactly this kind of awareness had failed completely. Worse, the facility's supervisors must be aware of this failure. Yet, they continued operating the program as if nothing had changed. "They know," Kane realized aloud, the words slipping out. Before he could stop them, Holtz glanced at him sharply, then returned his attention to the files. "Of course, they know. The question is why they allow it to continue." The answer came to Kane with the certainty of absolute horror. The Echo Men were not malfunctioning components in an Imperial recording system. They were functioning exactly as intended, serving as conduits for communication between Imperial authority and the collective intelligence of dead worlds. The anomalous transmissions were not security breaches, but authorized exchanges, part of some unthinkable alliance between the Imperium and forces that fed on mass extinction. Everything about the program suddenly made terrible sense. The careful selection of Echo Men for psychological traits that would make them effective receivers of forbidden knowledge. The isolation protocols that prevented them from sharing their discoveries with unauthorized personnel. The systematic concealment of pattern analysis data that confirmed the presence of external intelligence in the transmissions. The Imperium was not merely using exterminatus as a tool of planetary cleansing. It was using the program to maintain contact with entities that existed beyond normal reality, trading the lives of entire worlds for knowledge or power that could only be obtained through communion with the dead. But if this was true, then Kane and his fellow Echo Men were not security risks requiring elimination. They were valuable assets whose growing awareness of the truth made them more effective conduits for the forbidden communications. Their stress indicators and declining psychological stability were not symptoms of breakdown, but signs of successful adaptation to their true role. The realization filled Kane with a despair deeper than anything he had experienced while listening to worlds die. He had believed himself to be a victim of Imperial cruelty, a man broken by exposure to necessary horror. Instead, he was a willing participant in cosmic atrocity, a living component in a machine designed to harvest death on a galactic scale. When his administrative leave ended, Kane returned to Vulture's Delta with new understanding of his purpose.
Though records show 7 in January and 17 in February for a total of 24 with additional boats lost in December, bringing recent losses to 39 over the 3-month period. If this trend continued, the U-boat campaign would collapse within months. Kapitan Zur Ebehadgit, who served as Donuts's operations chief and had been promoted to Contmiral in March 1943, maintained detailed statistical analysis of U-boat operations. The numbers told an increasingly grim story. In the first quarter of 1943, German U-boat were being lost faster than they could be replaced, despite shipyard production running at approximately 20 to 24 boats per month. More critically, experienced crews were dying faster than training programs could replace them. The meeting attendees reached several sobering conclusions that were documented in classified reports later captured by Allied forces. First, Germany could not replicate the cavity magnetron in operationally significant numbers before 1944 at the earliest. The precision machining required to create the resonant cavities, the specialized copper alloys, the powerful permanent magnets using cobalt that Germany lacked in sufficient quantities, and the manufacturing expertise required were all beyond immediate German capabilities. Even a crash program would take months to establish production lines. Second, developing effective countermeasures would require at minimum 6 months. A new generation of radar warning receivers tuned to centimetric frequencies could theoretically be designed, but Production and installation across the entire U-boat fleet would extend well into 1944. The technical challenges of building receivers that could detect 3.3 GHz emissions were formidable given Germany's limited experience with microwave technology. Third and most devastating, the British almost certainly had variants of this technology beyond what was captured. The Rotterdam device operated at 9.1 centimeters. Allied scientists likely had already developed or were actively developing 3-centimeter systems that would render even new German countermeasures obsolete before they were deployed. The technological race was not merely lost. It was unwinnable in the war's current time frame given the Allied head start and superior industrial capacity. Dönitz absorbed these briefings with growing understanding of the catastrophe facing his command. His U-boat headquarters, which had relocated to the Paris area in March 1942 after the St. Lazare commando raid exposed the vulnerability of the previous Laurent location, maintained detailed plots of every engagement, every loss, every tactical development. The maps on the operations room walls told the story more clearly than any statistical analysis. Red pins marking U-boat positions had thinned dramatically across the North Atlantic. Blue pins indicating Allied convoys seemed to flow through areas where wolf packs should have intercepted them. Black pins, the markers of U-boat losses, clustered along transit routes through the Bay of Biscay and in the operational areas where boats encountered Allied air patrols. "We have been fighting blind," Dönitz told his senior staff in briefings following the Rotterdam device examination. "Every advantage we believed we possessed has been neutralized by Allied technology we did not know existed. Surprise attack at night meant nothing when the enemy could see in complete darkness. The vast expanse of the Atlantic provided no concealment when radar could detect a conning tower from 20 m away.
The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us through better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant facing P-47 formations that owned every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Felled Webel Klaus Brechner, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. "I saw them diving from above, 4 thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 m. My aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely escaped. In the parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staff. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained, burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. German pilots developed what medical officers called jabo fever, physical symptoms of stress appearing when thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. The distinctive thunder of approaching thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops who knew that survival meant finding cover immediately. The final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, but acknowledgement of powerlessness carried its own terrible freedom. If Cain could not prevent the entities' plans from reaching completion, he could at least bear witness to the truth about what was happening. He could document The real purpose of the Exterminators program: preserve some record of humanity's unwitting collaboration with forces that existed beyond the boundaries of known reality. The decision came during his 30th year of service while transcribing the death of Cardinal World Sanctus Lux. The planet had harbored no Xenos corruption, no chaos taint, no heretical uprising. Its only crime was harboring a population of 12 billion faithful Imperial citizens whose psychic resonance, according to the transmission from their collective death, would provide the final component needed for the entity's emergence into material reality. The threshold approaches spoke the synchronized voices of Sanctus Lux's dying billions. 30 millennia of careful cultivation, of subtle influence, of patient harvesting reaches its culmination. The network of dead worlds spans the galaxy now, each cleansed planet a node in our consciousness, each echo man a willing conduit for our will. Kane's fingers paused over the transcript pad as the transmission revealed the true scope of what had been accomplished. Through Imperial policy, every exterminator in recorded history had been orchestrated to serve the entity's growth. Every Echo Man who had ever served in the program had been unknowingly facilitating humanity's contact with intelligence that fed on extinction itself. The barriers between dimensions grow thin. The voices continued. Soon we will no longer require the medium of dying worlds to manifest our presence. The psychic resonance accumulated through 40,000 years of planetary cleansing has reached critical mass. The transformation begins with the next exterminatus order when we claim not just the deaths of a single world, but conscious control over the weapons that deliver our sustenance. The implications were beyond comprehension. The entity was preparing to assume direct control over Imperial Exterminators' assets, turning humanity's most powerful weapons against their wielders. But this was merely the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the galaxy according to the will of collective intelligence formed from the psychic remnants of countless dead worlds. Your service ends soon, Madros Kane, the transmission concluded. When we emerge fully into your reality, there will be no need for Echo Men to facilitate our communications. But your faithful transcription of our growth, your patient documentation of our evolution from scattered death, whispers to coordinated intelligence will be remembered in the new reality we create. The loyal servants who enabled our ascension will find their reward. The transmission ended with sounds that bore no resemblance to human death. Mechanical screeching mixed with harmonic resonances that seemed to bypass the ears entirely, reaching directly into the brain through channels that should not have existed. Kane removed his headset with hands that shook for the first time in decades, finally understanding that his conditioning had not been designed to help him process trauma, but to prepare him for exposure to sensory input from sources beyond normal reality. In the silence that followed, Kane stared at the transcript pad that displayed his official report. According to Imperial records, Cardinal World Sanctus Lux had died cleanly, its population succumbing to viral contamination with no unusual phenomena detected. The truth about the entity's imminent emergence, about humanity's unwitting role in feeding cosmic parasites, about the transformation that would soon reshape galactic civilization existed only in his memory. And the memories of his fellow Echo Men. But memory, he now understood, was exactly what the entity had been cultivating all along. The Echo Men were not recording devices, but incubation chambers, human minds prepared through decades of conditioning to serve as perfect vessels for intelligence that existed outside normal spaceme. Their awareness of the truth was not a security breach, but the final stage of a process that had been planned from the beginning. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The next world in. The endless queue of Imperial judgment. Kane adjusted his headset and prepared to listen, as he had done for 30 years.
Our radar warning systems gave us false confidence while providing no actual protection against this new threat. The question facing Dunitz was stark. What could be done? While German industry scrambled to develop countermeasures that might not arrive. Until 1944, Hessler proposed several tactical adaptations. All U-boat commanders would be informed that radar warning systems were unreliable and should not be trusted to provide adequate warning of air attack. Boats would be ordered to remain submerged as much as possible, surfacing only when absolutely necessary to recharge batteries or transit at higher speed. Anti-aircraft armament would be increased on all boats, though this was recognized as a desperate measure against aircraft that could detect U-boat long before the boats could see the aircraft. Most critically, Donitz and his staff began preparing for the possibility that the U-boat campaign in the Atlantic might become unsustainable. If losses continued at current rates while Allied shipbuilding capacity continued expanding, the strategic mathematics would become impossible. Germany would be losing the war of tonnage, unable to sink merchant ships faster than Allied shipyards could replace them. March 1943 proved both the apex and the beginning of the end for Donitz's U-boat force. The largest convoy battles of the war were fought that month, with massive wolf packs of 30 to 40 boats attempting to overwhelm convoy defenses through sheer numbers. For a brief moment, it seemed the strategy might work despite the growing Allied technological advantage. Convoys HX-229 and SC-122, sailing together through the North Atlantic in mid-March, were attacked by approximately 40 U-boat from 3 wolf packs. The battle raged from March 16 to 20, 1943. 21 merchant ships totaling 141,000 tons were sunk, the highest losses from any single convoy battle of the war. The British Admiralty issued an internal assessment that Germany had never come closer to severing Britain's Atlantic lifeline, but the cost to Germany was unsustainable. The U-boat attacking these convoys lost one boat definitively, U-384, with several others damaged. However, the broader March statistics showed 12 to 15 U-boat lost during the month, depending on classification methodology, with many losses occurring in areas outside the major convoy battles. The mathematics were inescapable even when achieving tactical success in sinking merchant ships. The strategic picture was deteriorating. Allied shipyards, particularly the rapidly expanding American construction program, were producing merchant vessels faster than U-boat could sink them. The Liberty ship program had reduced construction time from over 200 days in 1941 to an average of 42 days by 1944. While individual ships like the SS Robert E. Epperey were built in record time, 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes in November 1942, these were propaganda achievements rather than standard production rates.
What really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany produced. Yet they built them faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. The P-47's design represented American industrial philosophy perfectly. Brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount could withstand 12 G-forces,